Welcome to CoffeeZilla, guys. We have a great guest for you today with quite the story. Today we have Nikhil. I hope I got that name right. You were diagnosed with a form of leukemia that's very rare for your age, and you specifically want to talk about the predatory alternative health scams that are out there and how they target cancer patients. I'm going to kind of hand the floor over to you. Walk us through the basics, who you are, how you were diagnosed, and then just walk us through your story.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks for having me on and allowing me to talk about this, because I think it's really, really prevalent, and that's a scary, scary thing about this all. So yeah, I mean, I was a normal kid. I loved basketball, that kind of stuff until 17. And that's when, I realized after a few months of just being so tired all the time, getting nosebleeds, but never really expecting to have what ended up happening, right? And yeah, I got carted off into hospital one day after a blood test. They took me straight into emergency, and my doctor told me, Nikhil, the good news is you're 17, you have leukemia, but the bad news is you're 17 and you have leukemia. And I was, as everyone is, like shocked and devastated at that point. And yeah, I stayed that way for a long while until I found, the thing that actually got me out of it wasn't the usual motivational stories, right? They actually pulled me down, if anything. What really got me out, though, was I decided one day, let's take a step back, look at what had happened to me as if it had happened to someone else, right? And yeah, I mean, for the first time in days, weeks, I was able to actually look at what had happened to me objectively from there. And yeah, from there, it only made sense to focus on the stuff I could control, right? And to focus on that wholeheartedly and trying to do everything I could to get me out of this. So yeah, I was diagnosed young, and that sucked, but like, wasn't getting cancer younger also a blessing in a way, in that I could get as much treatment as possible? I could have a family behind me rather than one to care for, right? So yeah, I guess like that allowed me to see that there's always two ways of looking at things, and it made me realize that, you know what, let's take the path that leaves me happiest and healthiest. And yeah, I mean, so maybe the bad news was I was 17 when I had leukemia, but the good news was I was 17 when I had leukemia. So I sort of flipped that around. I believed in my doctors wholeheartedly, and it was all going well. I got into med school actually the year after diagnosis, and yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was a big dream of mine from like early on, but managed to do that. But midway through first year, I started relapsing. And at first, we had no idea what was going on. My blood counts were going down. And I sort of knew in my heart, though, like, what else could this be other than cancer, right? Coming back. And I had acute myeloid leukemia. And my chances when I was diagnosed were 10 to 20% that I'd survive 5 years, because I was picked up quite late. I had a really rare type of HLA subset on my mom's side, so that meant bone marrow transplant was going to be tough to find a match for me. But
walk back a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit for those of us who are not as bright
sorry.
with the leukemia stuff. What type of make it for my audience who doesn't understand anything, of course, make it it's a bad type of cancer, leukemia. And there's something with the blood type or something that you needed a match for the bone marrow transplant. To explain that a little bit more. I'm sorry.
That's it. That's exactly it. So basically I had acute myeloid leukemia, which is a form of aggressive leukemia that usually occurs in older people. And, it's still blood cancer, but I caught it pretty late on. And the major treatment for me, like they knew from the beginning, was going to be a bone marrow transplant. So in that procedure, rather than they also hit you with a lot of chemo and radiation, but what they want to do is they want to actually get someone else's bone marrow inside you, right, to make their blood cells in you. So like right now, I'm actually pumping out someone else's blood cells, even to this day. And what that does is your blood cells also include your immune cells.
It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. Like it's actually the only way a mammal can change blood types is by doing this procedure. And I've had two. So I've had three blood types in my life. Fascinating. Like I'm a cancer researcher now as well in immunotherapy. So this is like one of the first immunotherapies.
That's
like
crazy. You can like study
pretty cool
your own blood at this point.
You know what was really crazy? I went into the lab one day, one of my first days, and it's like a doctor who was treating me is now my colleague, and I was like, holy crap, that's so awesome.
That's really cool. How old are you now? So you were 17 when you were diagnosed.
Yeah, so I'm 26 now. So yeah, still kicking.
So we're a good ways on from the 5 years. Good. Let's get that way back in the past. Good. So that kind of brings us into what we're here to talk about, which is, okay, you've had this devastating, thing that honestly is hard for me to fathom. But then there's a compounding problem that sort of happened, which is you're in these dire straits. And I always say that desperation is the antidote to skepticism, because it just makes anyone vulnerable. When you're desperate, you're vulnerable to scams. And you came to me, and part of the reason you reached out is because you said, hey, there's this giant problem that no one's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big thing. Like me being diagnosed young and having some really low chances. Obviously, I think like it's a sad thing, but it's almost certain that someone in your friends list will start popping in. And for me, it was actually started by family. So like a family friend, they talked about this guy who's a doctor, and they were like, hey, we should go to him. He seems to have some amazing things that you could try. And yeah, I went in, like, I was like, okay, he's a doctor, he's a scientist, I know. So he's probably got some things. And as you say, you're 100% right. Like, you're desperate. And I mean, I was studying medicine. I am a skeptic just from like, even high school days, and medicine is like, it teaches you to evaluate evidence, right? And use that based on your, on that, that's what you provide treatments for, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, when I went in and saw him, like he started talking about, first off, sodium bicarbonate treatments and how alkalinity can really reduce your chance of cancer. And I was like, okay, it seems all right. The thing is, he actually pulled out a couple of case studies, and there are some case studies of spontaneous remissions occurring after that kind of stuff. I now look back at them and I know that, like, spontaneous remission does occur in a lot of the treatments that he was in, a lot of the cancer, that they made those studies on. But yeah, like that's when I started believing him. But then he started talking about vitamins and how I needed to be on the proper ones and get a good diet in me. And that the only proper vitamins that you could get that were super and amazing because they were all naturally sourced, so that meant like somehow the chemical compounds were more superior, that was what I needed to be on. And he signed us up at that point for Amway, and that's I believe yes, one of the
my whole audience just took a collective sigh, like, oh no, this is gonna spin off the rails real quick.
Yeah,
go ahead.
But I was lucky that I didn't just completely believe in him, because the next thing he said was, you need to also be on a low sugar diet. He also put me on this weird sort of instrument. I have no idea. And he was trying to sell us these water filters and all this kind of stuff. I have no idea if they were MLM products or if they were just random sort of things that he was doing as well. But he had like a stash of Amway vitamins. So I think he was somewhere in the middle of the chain. I had no idea, by the way, what MLMs were at this time. But yeah, the reason why I knew he was not really what he was sought out to be was because I asked him when he was talking about low sugar diets, like a basic first year medical question on glucose metabolism, like why, if sugars power cancer, right, and cancers just keep eating that sugar, your body will always have a normal level of glucose unless you are starving to death's point, right? Why can't cancers just end up like breaking down your muscles, breaking down fat stores and getting sugar that way, right? And he was like, I don't know. So then I asked him again, and I realized that he wasn't actually an MD, he was a PhD. And I was like, okay, this is a bit sus.
And so you find this
Yeah.
out, right? And so then you're like, well, this
Yeah.
guy may not be the help. But at this point, your family members just trying to help you. And you know, some of that stuff, some of the
Yeah.
I don't want to throw all alternative medicine under the bus, because it's good to have a healthy diet.
Yeah.
Like it's like that's good.
100%. And that's actually like that's the thing I always took in, right? Like I was, as you say, right, desperate. So when I was relapsing, I was just like, okay, bring in whatever you have. Like if it doesn't hurt me, it can't hurt. And yeah, I mean financially, like that's the thing. Like in Australia, we have free healthcare, right? If I was in America, things could have been very different. But we ended up like ordering this water alkaline filtration system that cost $1,000 or something. So it did sort of add up there. So there's that. But yeah, as you say, like it can't hurt to try things, and it also is probably beneficial. A lot of alternative things in mild conditions, particularly. But yeah, when they market it as cancer cures, that's when it becomes dodgy. And like post cancer as well, this guy was really trying to actually like recruit me, I guess, and he invited me to one of the seminars, and that's when I realized like, wait, this is like pretty bad. If a lot of, because I'm a medical student, and I knew a lot of the stuff that he was saying was pretty damaging, because like there's people there, like these
What
are
was he
mainly
saying that was damaging? For example.
yeah, so like he was telling people like, oh, these vitamins. He was using pretty much testimonials, getting people up on stage that he'd worked with, and telling them that, you know what, these vitamins, they helped me fix my diabetes. They helped me fix my heart issues. I'm no longer on diabetes medicines and things like that. And look, like, you know, if it's in the case of diabetes, if you manage your diet and things like that, you can control your sugar levels, and that's good. That's something you should be doing. So, I mean, that if he helped them, it was likely through his dietary and lifestyle modifications that he inspired in them. But the heart stuff in particular, I think like one person was like, I don't need to be on medicines anymore. And like, I just got a stent in my heart last week, right? And for that, you need to be on antiplatelet medicines for like a year, right? And if the guy stops that, that's a heart attack risk right there. And same thing for diabetes, right? If you're not on medicines that help control it, you could have accelerated disease processes occur. And then he was also like trying to recruit me to be like the guy who speaks about cancer. And I was
You're like a testimonial for him now. You're like the guy who took his little vitamins and got cured, but really you got cured from bone marrow treatment.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like that's the kind of thing he was trying to do. I wasn't all for it though, because like I looked up Amway. I still didn't know that Amway, what an MLM was. I think I only learned like after John Oliver's sort of thing on MLMs. But
sure.
I knew, but I saw so many things about it being a scam when I Googled the company, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to push this up there. And then I saw him like telling people, look, your cardiac issues are fixed. You don't need medicines now. And I was like, nah, man, that's I'm not gonna come up and talk about that. Like that's life threatening. And yeah, that was like my first experience with MLMs. And here's another thing about this all. Like, so my parents, my family, they like it might be because I'm Indian as well. So like I think this guy, by the way, he was like a word of mouth sort of thing. So a lot of the people there, as opposed to, you see a lot of people doing the digital marketing thing for MLMs nowadays. Back in those times, or maybe just because he targeted an older crowd, like everyone there was more elderly, and he was making all these crazy medical claims about various things, including cancer, at that point. So yeah, that was them. And I think being of Indian background and with parents as well that, you know, believe in like, you know, Ayurvedic medicines and stuff like that too, like a lot of alternative stuff is also pushed down. So I got a lot of pressure from my family to be on various things, and they're like, why don't you try and other things outside of medicine to fix you? And I was like, okay, but I'll try them, but it's probably not going to work. Like, and stop making this my fault as well. that I'm not getting better when I've got a cancer that's kills most people who get it, right? And yeah, that's like another pressure point that a lot of cancer patients and chronic illness patients, because I'm one of them too, and I'm still getting a lot of pressure.
That basically it's your fault that you're not doing more. When meanwhile
Yeah, like
you're going through hell and back to try to solve this thing, but because you're not doing their version of what's going to get you well, then now it's like you're not doing enough. And it's mostly because these people make such wild promises. I mean, your doctor can't say
yeah,
that this is going to cure you 100%, but an alternative medicine guy can be like, oh yeah, this is 100% cures people. Yeah, of course. You'll never be on medicine again.
yep, yep. That's the saddest thing about it, right? Like I have a startup now as well in the med tech sort of space. We're creating some medical devices. I know all about medical regulations. I know these guys are literally making medical claims that are illegal. And I've talked to like the TGA. I have friends who've talked to the FDA about these things, and they still keep going on because they have no way to actually like enforce these laws on people. Like, yeah. And that's the saddest thing, because I was a skeptic and I was still like, let's give this guy a chance. He's a scientist. He must know something. He showed me a study. And I was like, taking those things and I was like, look, it may help. And I was also like, look, if these things could help, why not try them? Right. And that's me. There's other people who we know avoid treatments
Right.
because of this thing too.
And I mean, I think that's really important to talk about. Real quick, I want to show people an example. Now, I apologize in advance. It's probably going to be pretty,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is triggering is the right word, but it's going to probably be upsetting because I'm going to show you a sales letter of an example of what I know is advertised here in America. This was advertised by one of the largest alternative medicine newsletters in our country. You ready? Can you really disease-proof your body? Nobel Prize winning chemist unlocks universal vaccine for cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. Survival rates soar 2,000% as tumors vanish, blood sugars plunges, arteries clear, and lost memories are restored.
What?
Yep, that's what they're talking about. But then you go and you read down. I'm going to give you the Spark Notes version of this, and it says, okay, now you kind of find out if you read a while, you learn about how bad big pharma is, that there's this miracle molecule that is the secret to the universal vaccine. 2-oxo-L-3-hexano-1,4-lactone 2,3-enediol. Wow. Now, what could that thing be? This miracle molecule. They say that's a mouthful, so we're just going to call it the universal vaccine. Okay, so you get to the bottom, and now if let's say you're a cancer patient, and you're hearing all these amazing stories about how, Martha's Alzheimer's got reversed, right? Would you like to know what that is? The universal vaccine is? I mean, you're going to have to pay $79 a year or whatever for it. But the universal vaccine is vitamin C.
Like, yeah.
Listen to that claim. Nobel Prize winning chemist unlocks universal vaccine for cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. The 4 big killers. Hey, let's just solve all of them. Let's just pretend this solves all. Why not?
That's really frustrating because vitamin C, we know, doesn't work in cancers. And yeah, like that's another thing I guess we're going to talk about in a bit, right? In that there's a lot of alternative medical centers, including like compounding pharmacies in Australia and things like that sell this kind of stuff. But yeah, I routinely get, because I do the whole blogging thing, right? And I've written a lot on this sort of space. I always get messages and emails from people saying exactly this kind of thing. And it's that sort of marketing ploy, like, as a scientist, I'm like expert opinion. That's like level 4 on the base bottom level of the hierarchy of evidence that you'd use, right? We actually look at studies and then try and use reviews to base our practice. But most people see there's an amazing doctor, right? That's unlocked this thing. And it's so easy to buy into though when you're desperate as well. Like that's the saddest thing about it, because a lot of these patients, right, they're not dumb. They're just not as medically trained, and also they're desperate, and their chemo sucks, right? And
Yeah.
treatment sucks, and that's the saddest thing.
One thing I want to get to is that you sent me a series of text messages from a friend of yours who is trying to, well, essentially, I mean, harassing you while you're like losing your mind in chemo. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? Because that was so unbelievably predatory to me. I was disturbed reading these text messages.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to post them up or whatever.
Sure.
I don't really mind. But yeah, this guy's a friend from high school. I guess this is like a typical sort of MLM thing. And the thing about it though, like he'd always been bullied at school, and he actually his dad passed away from cancer as well. He was still getting bullied, so I was like always sympathetic to him and like one of his only friends sort of thing. And yeah, then he starts sending me like messages. The first time he pinged me, I was in middle of chemo. And yeah, like over the next like 2-3 weeks, he was like, I really want to come and see you. I really want to come and see you and tell you about this amazing juice that I really think could really help people. And I'm like, okay, I've heard a lot of this before. And I've also like, I was also like, look, you're talking about your dad, but your dad passed away as well, right? And like he was still using that a lot. And yeah, I think like one of the most shocking things though was like a few months down the track, he kept messaging me week after week, and then he was like, "Oh wait, you have leukemia? Oh, this juice or whatever is shown like in 86% of cases to kill cancer cells." And I was like, "Dude, you've been telling me the last few months that this is a perfect juice for your disease, and you don't even know what the disease was, right?" And yeah, he'd ping me like at 5 a.m., 3 a.m.
He kept saying like basically, oh, this is really going to help you. This is going to cure you. He's basically telling you, hey, get out of that chemo ward and come visit me. I'll hook you up with some. And he wanted to sell it to you. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, let me give this to you. At home,
and you know what?
Under no illusions that this guy was altruistically trying to give Nikhil all this stuff. He was trying to literally sell it to you.
My dad actually ended up buying it, right? And tasted it. It was pretty horrible. But like I drank that stuff and just to get him off my back. And that's like, eventually like that's a lot of the sales sort of tactics that these guys use. So yeah, that was a friend. Let's say that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the person to some extent, I think to some extent, people who really believe in alternative medicine may actually mean what they say. They may think they're on like a mission of goodwill to sell this stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe. But
maybe
at some level, some of these people, like the doctors who are selling this stuff, the quote doctors who, they're actually chiropractors who are selling this stuff. A lot of naturopaths are chiropractors. Yeah.
I've actually been like, I've gotten one sample of, I can't remember the company, but I think like it just screamed MLM. And this is at a point where I knew what MLMs were from a podiatrist. That's like, a foot specialist, but not doctor. But I've actually had doctors give me USANA vitamins at one point as well. So it's not just chiropractors. There's some doctors trying to cash in on this as well. I don't know how you can be roped into that, but I guess they do. So it's really, really, really sad to see that, because doctors are trusted. and
it's such a lucrative market. I hate to put it in terms of economics, but the chronic conditions are the most lucrative. And you're talking about cancer is one of those things that people will be needing your drugs for years. That's what's so horrible about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That friend, like, he's in my DMs and sending me these messages, but like every single cancer group on Facebook, there's a lot of alternative cancer groups which are even worse. Like if you go in them, every single post is big pharma sucks, don't use chemo, and it's really, really bad. But even in the regular cancer groups, which are often well moderated, there's people just messaging you like, hey, I'm DMing you this, check it out. And it's always, they won't tell you the company name, they won't do anything. But I think it's like not just Facebook, but Facebook Messenger, where a lot of people are just pressurized into buying stuff. There's like one image I sent you of a guy telling someone with cystic fibrosis, which is like a genetic condition which is incurable. He's like insisting, hey, did your doctors really tell you it's incurable? These dudes have lived with this since they're like a few years old. Like the audacity and the sheer like lack of ethics there to target these dudes, it's really, really sad.
And they're telling them they can cure
But
this incurable disease.
yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable.
That guy was a juicer. I can't remember what company.
Juicer. So even in these Facebook groups, this is super prevalent, and maybe it's worth talking about the fact that this stuff can actually have adverse effects, not necessarily the bottles of juice themselves, but the attitude they instill when we're constantly pushing this narrative that big pharma bad, random Facebook Karen good with her little juice bottle. You've looked into this stuff. Obviously, you're researching medicine. What have you learned about the outcomes of people who do this alternative care stuff?
So like there are numerous studies which have like, looked retrospectively at cancer patients, and like one of the larger ones in particular, it noted, and they all show a consistent trend towards this level of mortality rates increasing when you have alternative medicine and alternative practitioners come into the mix in treatment.
Translation, mortality rate, alternative care, you die. More likely to die.
2 to 5.7 times more likely. And that's a scary, scary number behind it. And the reason why we know is because people are more likely to refuse chemo, radiation, and even surgery, which is like the main curative thing, right? In so many solid tumors. And it sucks to get surgery, but most people recover and get on with lives, right? And that's where it's really, really sad. And we're talking like 50% plus higher rates of refusing chemo and things like that in people who are brainwashed.
Yeah, because the people who do the alternative care, they may think to themselves, oh, it's working. Because, I mean, you'll have to tell me how true this is, but with cancer, it's not like you always are feeling bad. Some days, maybe you feel a little bit better. Some days. So maybe you think to yourself, my cancer's doing better, when in fact it's not, but because you're refusing traditional medicine and you're going towards this alternative thing, you don't really know.
Yeah. And that's a thing. Like, as well as this, like, the people who provide these alternative treatments, they don't keep records, they don't do studies, so they won't tell you about the people they've lost, right? And there are a lot of them. I've lost a few friends personally myself who had options otherwise, and to things like, low sugar, high citric acid diets and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's another really big thing that I guess we're going to talk about at some point too, that I'm really concerned about. And that is that there's a lot of alternative therapy clinics out there in, like, Mexico, Thailand, and international, like, sort of areas. And they are right now, like, I've gotten these ads targeted to me, I guess, because I'm a cancer patient, right? But right now they're advertising on Facebook, and these treatments, literally, they charge tens of thousands of dollars per week. And they were at one point like GoFundMe's biggest like reason for campaigns was these things. And like literally, there's a study I showed you. they only looked at 220 cases, but found like $1.4 million was raised in those 220 cases, which wasn't all of them, but like that was raised to fund these kind of operations.
Oh
And
my
Facebook is
gosh.
where they advertise. Yeah.
Facebook, dude, Facebook is such trash. So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
I didn't think that cancer was an ad vertical, but now all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh, it totally is. Cancer patient is like
Yeah.
something they know about you by, I guess, you typing in keywords or being part of groups. So then Zuckerberg gets in there, puts you in the ad vertical for, you know, cancer. And then these guys, these predators, and that's really what I call them, because I do believe this is predatory advertising. Because what are people going to say? No, I'm not going to pay $10,000 to save my life. They convince you they're going to save your life, and then you basically find the money, beg people, beg family members. And then it's just, you go there and get what?
Mhm.
What do they do?
Like I sent you a bill for one of them that a friend of mine sent me, and it was like $30,000, 33,000 for 3 weeks. Every single item on that bill is like there's vitamin B17, which is literally like a substance which is not a vitamin, by the way. It's like this thing that these non-doctors invented like a few decades ago and just sold just to make money. It turns into cyanide in your body. And then there's one, I think it's called the Colles toxins. I looked into this.
Bad.
Yeah, that's one of them. Colles toxins, they're apparently like, so I'm a tumor vaccine immunologist researcher, right? And I've like looked into these kind of things, and these companies are marketing them as like, it's a tumor vaccine sort of thing. What it really is though, it may have a slight impact in increasing your body's immune responses and stuff like that, which they propose can kill cancer. But like my own field, we know that tumor vaccines have like a 10 or 20% maximum efficacy rate when being used. They're pretty cool in that they have low side effect profiles, and they essentially are just activating your body against your own cancer cells and like retraining the immune system to kill them. That's cool. These therapies though, they're just saying, oh, we'll enhance your immune system and we'll try and get it to kill your cancer. Well, even when you combine tumor vaccines with that sort of effect, you get like 30% max, and that's in one tumor vaccine that's approved on the market, that's allowed to be out there. And that's like lower than the efficacy rates of many chemos and surgical options in that sort of space. So these alternative centers, I mean, they might have some people that they fix, but the vast majority will not get good treatment. You'll never hear about them as well because they don't report. They're based in Mexico. And I've talked to the TGA, which is our regulatory body, and I've had a friend talk to the FDA as well, which is America's obviously regulatory body. And the reason they can't prosecute on this is that it's based overseas. So they have no jurisdiction there. And meanwhile, like Facebook is making tens of thousands from these ads alone.
Facebook won't ban these ads?
I've reported them. I've actually had a friend who knew like, you know, a high up marketing guy at Facebook. And when I told him about this one company, yeah, they stopped advertising those things for a little bit, but now they're back. Like literally I saw the ads again. And also Facebook, like there was a feature where you could check which ads a page was running a year ago, not even a couple years ago, like a year ago. Now you can't. And like I'm just on the tip of the iceberg because that one company I saw, and I actually called them up and was trying to see like what kind of stuff they were offering, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to expose them, right? But yeah, like there's another company which is even bigger, and that has, you know, it has at least 22 employees at the hospital, 130,000-ish Facebook fans, and they run ads. Their videos have millions of views, and like they're turning over millions per year, per month even. Because yeah, I mean,
That is
$10,000
unbelievable.
a week.
Is that Vera to Life?
That
The
one
one you're
is
talking about?
another one. It's called Chipsa Hospital. But Veritalife is one as well. That's like mainly social media, digital marketing that they use. Chipso is sort of starting to go down that line. And there's like literally another like 5 that I could dig up the names for. And I know there's dozens of these, and they're advertising on Facebook. It's millions in revenue probably to Facebook per year. Yeah.
All of this really exists because, in part, people don't trust traditional medicine. And part of that, well, I guess another part of it's probably just the advertising's way crazier with some of this stuff. But part of the distrust of traditional medicine comes from, in part, the advertising that these people keep perpetuating. I mean, like, one big thing that every single alternative medicine person reinforces is the narrative of evil pharma, evil doctors. Your doctor at home might not be bad, but he's just naive because he doesn't understand the system of big pharma and how they're only out to get money. And the thing is, look, I don't think there's an honest person in the world who will tell you that pharma's perfect. But the idea that big pharma is out to kill people, that's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. Big pharma wants more patients. I mean, like, they want more money. It's like, of course, if they want to keep them alive. Why wouldn't they create the best possible things? And then people say, oh, well, they just want them like chronic patients forever. And it's like, oh, wait, those are, you're talking about the guys who created vaccines? Like, aren't those the things that fix people? But then when vaccines come out, you don't want to take the vaccines because that's bad too. So the vaccines are bad, but then the chronic condition medicines are bad. Everything's bad. Big pharma is terrible. But okay, go take my oxygen therapy. It's insane.
It is so bad because, like, being in medtech, right? I know I got a startup. I know there's a bunch of companies I know that are currently developing various molecules. If there was like cancer, like I could show you like one picture which shows various signaling pathways. It's so complex. The reason why there isn't a single cure for this is because everyone's cancer is different. Yet alone, like, the hundreds of different pathways, we haven't even explored like half of them, or even like probably not even a tenth of them. And there's no easy way to fix cancer because it's really hard to fix, right? And yet people, I guess, come in, they want to be. The thing is, big pharma, it isn't actually like, there's a lot of things that are unethical about it. And, they invest only 16% of their budget into R&D, but 50% plus into sales. The way they sort of corrupt doctors is also pretty concerning. Yeah, I'm like one of the first people to say big pharma is pretty bad in many ways, but alternative medicines, the thing about them is big pharma, to even get your drug approved, you have to show that it's better, that it's effective, that it's safe than the most current therapy out there, right? That's the only way you can, as a pharmaceutical, get your product out there. The alternative medicine industry is worth $300 billion. That's a very conservative estimate, by the way, of market share and research and all that.
Say that number again.
300 billion globally. And that's like minimum.
Really? Well, then, I mean, that right there debunks the whole idea that that alternative medicine is some David knocking on Goliath's door, right? That's what they always say. Hey, yeah, some rogue doctor is trying to fight against big pharma, but you got to buy now before big pharma shuts us down. Dude, these guys are a $300 billion industry. They're not David. They're not some tiny guy fighting the man. No. They're the other man. And they're one that doesn't even work. So stupid. It gets my blood boiling.
And that's the thing about them. Yeah. Unlike pharmaceuticals, they don't have to spend millions to billions in research. There's no barrier of entry. All you got to do is get your product there, get a bit of digital marketing spend, and go for it. Like that's what it is. It's like, that's why, as a business proposition, it's like so much less risk. It's so much more profitable to these guys, and that's what it is. It's like a profit loss statement to them.
And ultimately, the customer are sick cancer patients in a lot of cases. I mean, terminal cancer patients are some of the best best marketing material, because you take a guy who's going to get better definitely from traditional medicine, not such a good candidate. But you take a guy who's terminal, now you got yourself a customer on the hook because they're going to buy whatever you're selling. As sick as that is to even consider as a concept set.
Exactly. Like one of my friends, like he was a really good friend as well. Like I walked him through his whole cancer journey and stuff. Towards the end, he had like, I think that's the thing. Like even my family, they put a lot of pressure on me to do all these alternative therapies, but they mean well, right? But it's the guys behind them, behind all these therapies that are the real scumbags. That's the thing. They sometimes really believe in this too, right? But yeah, during his last few months, he was like, he had various different options of treatments he wanted to try, but he was convinced by this guy that, you know, a low sugar diet was what he needed in the middle of a bone marrow transplant, which is like during chemos, I used to eat when I could, whatever I could to get my weight up. And my friend, he ended up passing away. Like he was just so emancipated. He had no strength at all. And he was being told, you know, all this kind of stuff. And look, like, you know, I've seen so many people like benefit from various things, right? In the alternative space, they see a naturopath who helps them with their diet, things like that. And that's great. But in like really serious diseases, like there has to be a limit where we like, it's hard. Like we can't, I guess never will be regulated in what they say. It's hard to really enforce those claims, but at least like have the decency, or if governments could have the power to actually prosecute people who advertise to people that have cancer, that are dying often. Like that would be amazing. But it's sad to see it still just keeps going, and it seems like there's no end. And that's the saddest thing about it. Like I've been railing about this for a while, and I lost friends to this, and still goes on.
That seems to be the most concerning part about this. You know, if these guys were just making a little bit of money, I mean, it's terrible, but it's not a crisis. But the fact that people are literally dying because they will not take the treatment options because they have been told by some loser podiatrist who fancies himself a cancer doctor that some pill's going to save some little vitamin's going to save them instead of going under chemo. That's unconscionable. And that's the part that is the most frustrating about this. You know, I wish I could turn this. A lot of my shows are much more entertaining, but there's not much that's too fun about this topic, and it makes it so hard to cover because I don't want to bring down my, like it's you don't want to be a downer, but at the same time I feel like this topic is so critical to cover, which is why I'm so happy to have you on today, is because you're a living, breathing case study for why this matters, right? If you had believed those people and gone down that path and refused the bone marrow transplant, it's a good chance I wouldn't be talking to you today.
You know, the only reason I'm actually still here is a site called clinicaltrials.gov. So, you know, with my medical school training, I actually, like when I relapsed, I told myself, you know, it sucks, but let's try everything I could have under my belt and try using every skill I had, right, at that point to save me. So I went on clinicaltrials.gov. I looked up, because I figured, like, you know, my doctors knew best treatments possible for me. They knew that bone marrow transplant is probably the only curative thing, but clinical trials are where, like, you know, the future is. So I was like, that's where we'll probably find random different options. And when I went there, I then did like pretty much mini literature review on myself, and I found a drug that actually was going through phase 2 studies, which are like the second sort of stage before the large randomized control study sort of phase of getting a drug approved. Yeah, it was going through those studies, and it had been shown in leukemia patients like me who had failed bone marrow transplants and had to get a second one because I needed a second one at one point, that it improves life outcomes. So yeah, like when I pitched that to my doctors, and they were like, look, this could probably work, and we have a way of getting it to you. And like at first it was like, oh, this might cost you like $10,000-$15,000 a month, but they managed to get it to me for free, even though I wasn't like able to be enrolled into a clinical trial. And that's what saved my life, right? Science and
Wow.
actual medications, right? That's what really, really helps. And like a lot of people are being denied this sort of opportunity. A lot of people don't know about clinicaltrials.gov as well because someone's forcing this down their throats at the end and when they're really, really desperate.
Well, I'll tell you this, you know, a lot of times when you see something a lot in ads, you know they have a huge profit margin because they can afford to spend all that money on advertising. Fundamentally, clinicaltrials.gov probably doesn't have much of an advertising budget compared to a lot of these alternative medicine people. You know, I think your story is so
Yeah.
powerful, and I think you're doing a really good job of getting the awareness out there. So yeah, I really wanted to thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else we didn't touch on
Yeah.
that you felt like you absolutely wanted to hit on with your story here?
Um, yeah, I think like I think we got a lot through a lot of the things that, you know, I really, really wanted to get out there because yeah, I think the fact that this is all targeted towards cancer patients and that a lot of these people exist and that, you know, 53% of cancer patients are on some form of complementary alternative medicine. And it's a whole huge industry that's really underappreciated in how much it impacts people. And yeah, there's, you know, with all the conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxers becoming mainstream these days, this thing is only growing. So yeah, I know. That's another whole, like I've had anti-vaxxers like literally come in, they've taken photos of me and said, this is before a vaccine and this is after. And they had like a photo of me, not even pre-cancer, but in chemo, bald, and then one of me now, like with my skin issues and stuff. And like that kind of stuff, like I can deal
That's
with
so
that,
sick.
but it's just so sad to see and to like these kind of dudes though, they post this kind of crap and it goes viral because it's also engaging a lot of people and it's literally just people are just trying to become, I don't know, there's like these mad influencers and stuff like that and trying to sell products. And that's what it is. Like, if there's a way that people can do it, people will do it. There will be some scumbags who will. And it just keeps happening. So that's, yeah, just a frustrating, just a frustrating.
Way to end on a light
Frustrating.
note there, Nikhil.
Yeah, I know. I really am funny, guys, like outside of all this. But yeah, this is a bit more serious, I guess.
I mean,
But
truthfully, you seem like a
yeah,
really,
yeah.
you know, you have a great mindset, great attitude, lighthearted dude. You know, it's like, and your story, I love that you're now in immunotherapy. That's like, what way to go full circle with it. That's so cool. That's really cool, man.
Yeah, and seriously, like what you're doing as well is awesome. That Dan Bilzerian breakdown was great too. Because as a poker player, like I've watched that stream where he went and started playing and he didn't know what he was doing and he was asking his friend how to play like one of the most standard hands possible. And I was like, dude, this guy has no clue what he's talking about.
No clue.
And yeah, like all the stuff that you do though is really, really, really cool. And it's really, really, really good. And yeah. And yeah, I guess I should talk about so I write, you know, about this whole experience and stuff. I'm really bad at selling myself, but just yeah, I'm on Facebook. There's nikhilautar.com. I'll probably put a comment down on the video.
We'll
Or
put some
something.
links. You can
And
put a comment.
yeah,
Nick,
yeah, yeah,
nikhilautar.com is the, yeah, I'll put a link and
yeah,
go check them out, guys. You write about your experiences
yeah,
and all sorts of things. We'll put all your social down there and hopefully some people who found your story inspiring,
yeah,
which I think is probably like everybody, will go follow you.
yeah.
So
Like that's honestly like the best thing about it is like when I get messages from patients and I'm able to talk them through and help them in some way. Yeah, that's what got me starting to do this. And yeah, I'm always here to talk if I can. Yeah.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.